All right, hello everybody. So hopefully the sound is a little bit better using earbuds. I want to talk to you guys about Alberta and where it's headed and whether separation is something that is going to continue to be a conversation, which yes it is, spoiler alert. But I'm also going to say this, I'm going to push back against the astrologers that are saying that the astrology is for sure sending us towards separation. I'm going to be the one that pushes back a little on that and says if we follow traditional astrological rules and we look at things like progression charts, we look at synastry charts, we look at solar arc charts, but especially looking at composite charts, we're not seeing breakup rules being followed or separation rules or succession rules being followed in a way that would indicate that Alberta is going to fully separate away from Canada. What it is showing, especially when you go into things like your solar arc charts, as well as a progressed composite chart, which I'll explain what that is in a second, those charts are showing a change in identity that is putting pressure on the identity of the entire relationship between Alberta and Canada. It's showing internal pressure, it's not showing external stuff in the way that we would expect to see it if there was going to be a movement of the home, the family, outside of the typical home family structure. We're just not seeing that in those composite and progressed charts. So what's a composite chart versus a synastry chart? So a synastry chart is taking two charts together and kind of just seeing how they interact with each other. Canada and Alberta's chart, synastry-wise, is really interesting. For the most part, they get along pretty good. They have a pretty good fit, but there is some core areas in that fourth and fifth house space, as well as in the eighth house space, that does create some tension. And the reason that that happens is because Alberta does have this independent type energy to it that is wrapped up in taking care of your neighbors. So when you hear phrasing coming out of the UCP or even from the separatist movement that they want to be a sovereign Alberta inside a united Canada, that doesn't really make sense politically. We don't really know how to define that politically. What does that mean politically? I can tell you though, based on the charting, what it means. When we look to see, based on astrological rules, what it means is we want a little bit more agency, not necessarily sovereignty. We have sovereignty. The way that our provinces are set up, we actually have a lot more power than what the federal government does. So affordability issues that you're experiencing from a provincial space, those are a provincial issue. We can go after Ottawa all we want. All they can do is send money. What's done with that money, that's up to the provinces. So when we're getting money sent to us, which we do here in Alberta, we do get a few $billions every year from the government in transfer payments for healthcare and education and infrastructure and municipality support, although the UCP has been putting their hands in those pockets to take that money. But that money comes from the federal government, and then the provincial government divvies that out. So it's not that we don't necessarily have agency, it's that perhaps Albertans, and this is an interesting thing I'm going to talk about at the end of this video, is perhaps that Albertans are getting ready for an identity shift from a political space. Not necessarily an identity shift from a succession place, that we're not leaving Canada. That's not really what's happening. So when we look at something like a composite progressed chart with Alberta and Canada, what we see is this drive for a little bit more agency, but a call from our own internal self to grow up. That is the shifting that is being seen, that I think people, when they look at Pluto and they see what Uranus is doing, and they just look at the signs as they are from a surface space, yes, it would look a little bit like a breakup and that we're definitely not in a good space relationship-wise. But when you look at it from a progressed space, or you look at it from a transit space, like an overall transit space, that's not really what it's looking like. what it's looking like is that the North Node is trying to bring in, when we go all the way to March 2029, it looks like the North Node is trying to bring in more joy and more of a family unit. It wants to allow for Alberta, Canada wants to allow for Alberta to function in that more sovereign, agency-filled space. This could look like things like breaking down interprovincial trade borders. This could look like giving Alberta a little bit more say over its natural resources. This could look like accountability regarding money being transferred from Ottawa to Alberta regarding affordability and infrastructure. And that could look like Alberta pushing back and saying, absolutely not. We do have Saturn in here, and we do have that sun and the moon in the 4th house. And so there's a season of maturation and sort of some solidification of sense of identity and emotional base. We are digging up. One of the things that a lot of astrologers, separatist astrologers included, they have seen, and I think this is adding a little bit to that separative narrative, is this past stuff being brought up that's really maladaptive. I've grown up in Alberta, and I don't remember a time where we didn't hate Ottawa. I think we've just always hated them here. It just always is the background narrative that we have the short end of the stick, even though Alberta only contributes 3 to 4% to Canada's GDP. We're not actually the economic powerhouse, but we really want to believe we are. And we really want to believe that we're being hard done by Ottawa. It's a little bit of the spoiled Nepo baby energy that you're seeing with that, of like, we just want more, and we're not realizing, partly because a lot of people don't understand civics, and that's okay. But when you don't understand how things and stuff work, that can be a challenge to understanding why things and stuff are the way that they are. And this chart is calling for a confrontation to redefine boundaries and to have a sober evaluation of what is actually being given versus what is actually being taken, and whether there's a fairness and an equity in that. The thing about it is that with Pluto in there, in that 12th house, when we look at it at 2029 from that composite chart space, which is the overall view of the energy of the relationship, it's essentially its own chart. It tells you what's going to happen. That North Node and Mercury trines, and so there's a lot of insight and liberation and a lot of revolutionary maturing of thought, not necessarily of action. I think if Mars was a little bit more active in this, you could probably say yes. There's probably something happening there, because the houses, the succession houses, are being activated, but they're not being activated at the decans they need to be. So that's your degree marks that they need to be in order to say there's definitely a breakup happening here. The progress charts don't really show that that's where the energy is headed. So when we look at progress charts, again, that's the overall look of not just today's look. A transit is just for today. A progress is for like your year. When we look at solar return charts, what's the theme for Alberta coming up? When we look at the Alberta and Canada composite chart with that progressed view and the overlay of it, it talks a lot about a need for the relationship to face a more harmonious, matured space and to take the victimized mentality out. There is a lot of repressed anger, and there's a lot of shared work that needs to happen in that chart between the 6th house and then spiritual belief, which is your 12th house, or even just kind of how you want to show up in your life. This is sort of the manifestation of all of your beliefs and your core values. Alberta's chart is moving into a space where there is a lot of pressure on it to mature and to redefine its sense of self within the structure that it already resides, not breaking out of that structure, but a redefinition internally. So it's kind of like you think about a marriage that's been around for 50 years. That relationship probably does not look even remotely the same at that 50-year mark as it did the first day. And those people probably don't look the same. because that's generally not how relationships that are capable of lasting, they don't just stagnate. And we're not seeing a stagnation in these composite charts. We're seeing a lot of call to growth in the way that you would look at a mature relationship that's 50 years old and you're going into your 50th anniversary. That there have been difficult times, and we're definitely in one of those. Alberta's chart is seeding a need for more agency. That is what this last solar eclipse is putting in there. That doesn't mean breakup. That's different. So when we see this emotional core identity that is being, for Alberta, that is being ignited by things like a progressed sun or a composite moon in Mercury in a fourth house, it just means that we need to bring warmth and understanding, and then like conscious expression, foundational work regarding the emotional interplay between the two. So do Albertans really need to hate on Ottawa, and does Ottawa really need to hedge? We also see a north node alignment where with Venus that is progressed along the north node in the fifth house. And that gets a lot of trines from Saturn and Venus, which is really strongly guiding and pushing the relationship into a more affectionate space by testing the boundaries, by saying, hey, I'm going to go here. Are you okay with that? And Albertan's saying, no, I'm not actually. Not having a temper tantrum over it, just saying, that's not going to work for me. And so there's definitely transformations that are going to happen within the emotional bedrock, but not necessarily within the structure of how we reside within Canada. So a lot of past karma, it is just being brought up really crazily. And I think that's why people think separation's happening, is because of that Plutonian energy and that Uranian and Neptune energy. Neptune in particular is dissolving a lot of structure right now. It's also dissolving a lot of trust within structure right now. And Alberta's always kind of been distrustful of Ottawa. So you can understand why it feels so heightened right now. But again, when we look at where the chart is headed versus just the glimpse of today. So yeah, there's a lot of tension today, but overall it's not headed for a tenuous spot. It's headed for a growth spot. There's an internal tension and a call to redefine the relationship, just like a relationship of 50 years. You have to redefine that as you go. It's not always going to stay the same. The person that you're with, not always going to stay the same. So now I want to move on to the solar arc chart for Alberta. I drew this one for March 2nd, 2029, a little early in the year. But we're going to go with it just because that is where a lot of the seeding for this particular eclipse energy started. So a lot of evolving themes regarding and development regarding the foundation of self, how we view ourselves here in Alberta. But moving that sense of self more in alignment with the call on where we need to go and that maturing that needs to happen. So there is a big drive in the first house for self-assertion. Again, I think that, because you've got Neptune in that first house, it's really challenged by Mars, the solar Mars, as well as Jupiter. And so there's a lot of opposition to the sun. There's a lot of squares. There's a lot of fighting. And so self-image, intuition, sort of this idealistic, nostalgic, past energy view is being confronted by an external demand for facts. It's very Capricorn energy, okay? And so it wants tangibility. Alberta wants to see, like, we're actually getting a good deal. It wants to see some expansion in its agency. However, it's going to test that sense of self, because can we actually do this without Canada? Now, this solar arc chart, I did not put this with Canada's. This is just Alberta's solar arc. So when we look at this, what we do see, just in summary, so major transformational phases, trade agreements, internal structuring, but not separating. That separation degree, it's just not showing up. And it's not showing up, it has to show in other houses. And I think that's the thing too, that when you're watching people talk about separation, if they can't see it in at least 3 other spaces in the chart, following proper astrological rules, it's probably not accurate. We do see, as a theme, Alberta's coming back into its more Cancerian energy, but having it in a more matured space. So things like, and this is where this nebulousness happens with Neptune right now, 60% of Albertans disagree with where the UCP is taking them, but we're all going to vote for the UCP. The voter intention is still, even though the majority of Albertans are unhappy, they're not willing to look somewhere else. Now, when I pull the 2027 chart for Alberta and the UCP, and this is, I talked and alluded to this earlier, that we would talk about this, that does have a very shifty, breaky, uppy energy to it. And the reason I bring that up is because I think that that's a lot of what we're seeing in Alberta's chart, is this movement when we look at the transit of it and we look at the progress of it, especially the progress chart. When we look at that and we look at Alberta and its relationship dynamic in a composite chart with the UCP, there is a shifting away from the UCP ideologies and political leanings, and there's something new that Alberta's moving towards. Not separation, though. We're just not seeing those transits and interplays happening. They're just not. There's opposition in Alberta's chart with the UCP. I did set it for the election in November of 2027. I don't think that they're actually going to make that election. And I think that that's probably where you're going to see the charting really start to highlight the fact that there isn't a separation happening, that that's not really what we're going after. But it has more to do with a period of maturation where our ideological belief about how we should be able to function needs to come into clarity regarding a more practical form of how we do that. So we can say that we want agency and sovereignty, and we want to be a sovereign, a sovereign Alberta within a united Canada, but if we can't define that, it's a very ideological statement to make that doesn't really have a lot of, what does that mean? Constitutionally, legally, trade-wise, what does that mean? It's not very well defined right now. And so there's this inner transformation pressure that's happening in Alberta's chart to manifest outer viewpoints so that we are actually coming back into alignment with who we are as a province. We are a very motherly, caring province. We have a lot of Cancerian energy that wants to take care of our neighbors. We've kind of lost that, I think, personally. So really what this chart, when we look at the progress chart of Alberta, and we look at the composite chart of Alberta and the UCP and the election coming, I think you could probably say we're seeding a future where we need to be more disciplined. And we can't have these temper tantrums anymore. And we need to have realistic conversations. It's about an internal shift, not an external shift. Again, if we were seeing different degree marks happening, if there were different types of interplay happening in different houses, with different systems, then yeah, I would say sure, it's probably breakup energy. But I think this is just the 50-year-old relationship that's in a shift so that it can survive. We just do not see, especially with the solar arcs, we're not seeing, that's this chart here. Okay, we're not seeing super big breakup energy. We've got the North Node. So this is for March 2029. We've got the North Node in the 12th house at 0 degrees. That's not an ending of something. That's the building of something. And the North Node does like to bring in joy. It's also sitting with the midheaven in Saturn. Those are finishing up something. And they are sitting over top of Pluto at 22 degrees. So we're definitely coming into the ending of something. But when you look at where some of those other karmic points are, if we look at, let's say, we'll go over to the 8th house, the moon is only sitting at 2 degrees. If we were looking at breakup energy, we would need to see that at a very different space. And it is sitting in a very supportive space with Jupiter and Libra. Jupiter's sitting at 5 degrees. So again, something new, but we're not completing something. There's been no actual ending where that ending needs to happen, right? So that Jupiter was in the 4th house with Virgo. There's no breakup energy happening there. We have Capricorn sitting with the sun. The sun's only at 8 degrees. I just don't see that breakup energy. Even Black Moon Lilith. Like, she's sitting with Leo in the 3rd house for this chart. And she's quite happy. There's some good communication. Her needs are being met. Leo's taking care of her. We have a beautiful, beautiful supportive energy from the 2nd house into the 6th. And that's your group house. Your 6th house is your groups. Your 2nd house is your sense of value. So this is where we see like trade barriers coming down. This would be indicative of that, especially with Mercury being in there and the IC's in there. And it's coming over top of Uranus. So and that Uranus sits at 0 degrees. So there's new deals, new things happening, but it's not breakup energy. We would need to see these degree marks towards the end if that's the only rule we were following. So even just that rule. But there's other things we have to look at. The trines and the sextiles and the stelliums. There's a lot of stelliums in Alberta's chart, which means that there's a lot of potential for growth and movement. Yeah. If we follow the rules and we look at progressed charts and we look at composite charts and we look at solar arc charts and we look at solar return charts and we follow the rules of astrology, we don't see breakup. We do see personal internal evolution. That's different. Like I said, this is the 50-year-old, well, longer, obviously, marriage that has to make some shifting and some adjusting, because that is what long-term relationship is all about. I think a part of the reason you also see this chart being as loud as it is and astrologers feeling like there's breakup energy, again, is because of that internal pressure. And people have a hard time looking inward. Alberta is in a shadow period. We are unearthing a lot of the things that we need to decide as a province. Do we actually want to die on that hill? Like, is it actually worth doing that? Or could we serve the collective better by taking what we individually know how to do and going out into our communities instead of fighting with this entity that we don't really even understand half the time what's happening? We don't really understand why Danielle consistently goes after Carney and then turns around and is his BFF. We don't really understand those politics and those dynamics. And, until somebody chooses to go into that space, you never are going to understand it. And I doubt even they understand it. It's probably why it's so freaking messy. But there's a call here from a governance space, but as well as a collective individual space of those individuals, you and I, that live in our communities. And it's asking for the conversation to grow and mature beyond the past narratives that we've always held regarding our relationship with mom and dad, aka Ottawa. It's asking us to go from that period of we kind of just always, when you're younger, you can blame mom and dad to a point, and then by 25 years old, you best be standing on your own 2 feet and working on your own healing because they don't have power or shouldn't have power and control at that point. That is kind of, we're going from being teenagers to adults in the Alberta chart, if we were to put it into that type of a perspective. It's a growth and a maturing that's happening. That 11th house opposition is just crazy. 11th to 5th. And again, it's saying we have to deal with the habits that we continually bring forward. And it's that call to cycle break. What narratives, what belief systems, what ideologies have we built into our identity here in Alberta that don't actually serve us? It's not breakup energy, it's maturing energy. It's redefining the relationship, but not a breakup. So I hope that helps. Let me know if you want me to really, really dig into this and talk about the rules, because I definitely can let you know, like if I was, like what the exact rules are. That's a very long video too. This was just a short overview of what we're seeing with these progressed and composite charts. But as of March 2029, Alberta still stays. We're still here. We're just redefining relationship with Canada, but there's no breakup actually happening. So I guess we'll wait and see. All right, back to the witchy woo-woo cards. Bye.